Imagine Mike Tyson, the Iron Mike who once ruled the boxing ring, now trapped in a cold, unforgiving prison, framed for a crime he didn't commit. Surrounded by predators like Blaze Hensley's ruthless gang, the Iron Fangs, Tyson must fight not just to survive but to expose a sinister conspiracy. With every punch, every move, he claws his way toward justice. Can this legend rise from the ashes of betrayal, or will they silence him forever? Subscribe to the channel, share the video, and write in the comments what city you were from. In the cold gray prison yard, a group of inmates sized up their newest target, Mike Tyson, once the most feared heavyweight champion in boxing history. His imposing frame and piercing gaze marked him as prey to them, a broken man stripped of his freedom and dignity. But appearances can be deceiving. The man they planned to break was no ordinary inmate. He was a warrior who had faced down opponents in the ring with unmatched ferocity. Framed for a crime he didn't commit, Tyson now found himself entangled in a deadly game orchestrated by forces far beyond these walls. As whispers spread about an impending attack from the notorious gang known as the Iron Fangs, tension crackled in the air like static electricity. Tyson's mind raced as he absorbed the weight of his situation. He wasn't just fighting for survival. This was personal. Someone powerful wanted him silenced, and the Iron Fangs were their pawns. Every glance exchanged between gang members felt like another thread tightening around his neck. Yet beneath his stoic exterior, Tyson's instincts roared to life. This wasn't just a fight, it was a reckoning. And if there was one thing Mike Tyson knew how to do, it was throw punches that left opponents reeling. The stage was set, not only for violence, but also for justice. With every step toward confrontation, Tyson vowed to expose the corruption running through the veins of the system and remind everyone that even in the darkest places, legends refuse to be broken. A legend stripped bare. Inside the dimly lit cell, Mike Tyson stood motionless, his massive frame nearly filling the cramped space. The walls bore the stains of years of neglect, and the acrid scent of sweat mingled with despair hung heavy in the air. It was a stark contrast to the world he once ruled. The electrifying roar of crowds, the flash of cameras, and the adrenaline-fueled chaos of the ring. Here, silence pressed against him like a suffocating weight, broken only by the distant clang of steel doors echoing through the block. Tyson exhaled sharply, his chest rising and falling as memories flooded back unbidden. He thought of his days as Iron Mike, the unstoppable force who struck fear into opponents with every punch. Those moments when victory seemed inevitable, where his fists carried the weight of countless knockouts, each one a calculated decision made in the name of dominance. Now, betrayed by a country he had sworn to inspire, framed for a crime he didn't commit, he felt the crushing irony of being caged like an animal. His hands clenched involuntarily at the memory of his father's military funeral, the folded flag still tucked away in a box he'd never opened. Loneliness gnawed at him, but beneath it burned something else: resolve. Through the small reinforced window on the cell door, Tyson scanned the block. Tattoos marked alliances, body language revealed intent. The lines between predator and prey were drawn clearly, and Tyson knew exactly where he stood: a target. Whispers had already reached him. The Iron Fangs were watching, sizing him up. Their stares during meal breaks, the subtle gestures in his direction, all spoke of violence simmering just beneath the surface. For the first time since entering this hellhole, Tyson allowed himself a flicker of doubt. Could he survive here? Or would the system finally succeed in breaking him? But then he clenched his fists again, knuckles white. "I've faced worse," he muttered under his breath, though the words barely registered over the storm brewing inside him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving they couldn't take everything from him. Not his pride, not his spirit, not yet. Shadows of doubt, sparks of hope. As Tyson sat in the visitation room, his broad shoulders slightly hunched, Jessica Green appeared on the other side of the glass partition. Her sharp eyes studied him intently, searching for cracks beneath his hardened exterior. She wasn't seeing the unshakable fighter she'd imagined. This wasn't the same man who once commanded arenas with his presence. Instead, she saw vulnerability etched into the lines of his face, exhaustion weighing heavily on his features. The fluorescent lights above cast harsh shadows, amplifying the toll this place had taken on him. "Mike," Jessica began, her voice low but urgent, cutting through the sterile hum of the room. "I've been pulling every string I can find. The case against you is full of holes, but exposing them will take time." Tyson's jaw tightened as he rested his hand against the cool steel table, his fingers drumming absently. "Safe," she said, "safe." Did she have any idea what it was like in here? Every corner he turned, every breath he took, felt like stepping into quicksand. "This isn't like a battlefield, Jess," Tyson replied, his tone gravelly with suppressed frustration. "Out there, you know who the enemy is. Here." His voice trailed off, his gaze dropping to the scratches marring the table's surface. "Here. They're everywhere." Jessica frowned, her pen frozen mid-air over the notepad in her lap. "The Iron Fangs. They're watching me too," Tyson admitted, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Sizing me up. It's only a matter of time before they make their move." His grip on the edge of the table tightened, knuckles whitening further. Despite his attempts to appear composed, the cracks were showing. Fear wasn't something Tyson was accustomed to admitting, let alone feeling, but the weight of this place was relentless. Her expression softened, determination giving way to genuine concern. "Mike, you've faced worse than these thugs," she insisted, leaning closer as if trying to bridge the gap between them. "You've led fights that no one else would dare step into. You're one of the strongest men I've ever met." Tyson's voice wavered slightly as he responded. "Out there, I had a team. I had control. In here." He gestured vaguely to the oppressive walls surrounding them, his frustration palpable. "In here, I'm alone." Jessica hesitated, her hand hovering over the glass in an unspoken gesture of support. "You won't break," she said firmly, though her eyes betrayed the worry gnawing at her. "But promise me something. If they come for you, you fight. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you afraid." Tyson met her gaze, the flicker of resolve returning to his eyes. "I'll try," he said quietly, though the words carried the weight of a vow. "But this isn't just a fight, Jess. It's a different kind of war, one without honor or rules." Jessica nodded slowly, her voice steady, despite the unease shadowing her features. "I know it's not fair. I know this isn't where you're supposed to be. But you have to hold on. The truth is out there, and I'll find it. You didn't sabotage that pipeline, Mike, and we're going to prove it." Tyson exhaled sharply, the weight of her words both comforting and suffocating. "They framed me for a reason," he thought bitterly. Someone powerful wanted him out of the picture, and they weren't done yet. The Iron Fangs were just the beginning. The tension builds. In the mess hall, the chaotic noise of clattering trays and muffled conversations filled the air. But for Tyson, the atmosphere was anything but lively. He sat alone at a worn metal table, his back instinctively pressed against the wall, scanning the room with sharp, calculating eyes. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. The Iron Fangs dominated the space, their tattoos and crude symbols marking them as predators. Tyson knew better than to underestimate them. Their leader, Blaze Hensley, lounged at the center of the room, a smug grin plastered across his face as he surveyed the scene. Tyson focused on his tray, forcing himself to eat the overcooked pasta and watery beans, each bite a deliberate act of defiance. He could feel Blaze's stare, boring into him, a prelude to the storm gathering on the horizon. "Hey, Carter!" A sharp voice cut through the din, causing the room to quiet slightly. Tyson didn't look up immediately, knowing better than to give them the satisfaction. When the voice came again, closer this time, he raised his head. Blaze stood a few feet away, flanked by his gang, sneering loudly enough for others to hear. "What's the matter? Sold your boy food not up to your standards?" Tyson met his gaze, his expression calm, but unyielding. "Just trying to get through my meal in peace." Blaze laughed, a sound more menacing than humorous. "Peace? You think there's peace in here?" He leaned forward, resting his hands on the table as his gang closed in behind him. "You're in the jungle now, Carter, and in the jungle, the weak get eaten alive." Tyson didn't flinch, though his hand subtly tightened on the edge of the tray. "If that's supposed to scare me, you're going to have to try harder." The room seemed to hold its breath, the tension thick enough to choke on. Blaze's smirk faltered for a split second before returning sharper. He straightened, motioning to one of his men, a wiry guy with a crooked nose, who stepped forward, snatching the bread off Tyson's tray and taking a dramatic bite. "Ain't bad, huh?" The gang laughed, their taunts echoing through the hall. Blaze tilted his head, his voice dripping with venom. "You know what I see when I look at you? A man who doesn't belong here. A man who thinks he's better than the rest of us." His words hit harder than Tyson expected, stirring doubts he'd tried to suppress. For a moment, he felt the room closing in, the eyes of everyone watching, waiting for him to break. "You've got it wrong," Tyson said finally, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "I'm not here to run, and I'm not afraid of you." Blaze's smirk widened, but there was something darker in his eyes now, something dangerous. "Oh, you will be. Give it time." The gang laughed again, their voices grating like nails on a chalkboard. Blaze took a step back, his gaze never leaving Tyson. "Enjoy your meal, soldier boy, while you can." They moved away, their laughter and jeers lingering in the air. Tyson exhaled slowly, his grip on the tray loosening. He could feel the eyes of the other inmates on him, some curious, others pitying, a few amused. But he didn't care about their opinions. He cared about survival. Each bite of his meal became a silent declaration. They wouldn't break him. Not today. The first strike. As Tyson walked back to his cell, the fluorescent lights overhead flickered ominously, casting distorted shadows along the corridor. His senses were razor-sharp, tuned to every sound behind him, footsteps faintly echoing, barely audible above the din of the prison. He knew they were coming. Reaching the cell block, the air grew heavier, colder, the usual noise of shouting or laughing inmates replaced by a tense anticipation. Eyes peered through bars, watching him with a mix of curiosity and unease. They knew something he didn't. The ambush came fast. A sharp sound, a muffled thud of boots on concrete, was his only warning, before a wiry figure lunged at him from the shadows. Tyson pivoted instinctively, deflecting the attack with a forearm. The impact jarred his arm, but his training took over. Every movement was precise and efficient. The assailant, a lanky man with tattoos snaking up his neck, staggered back, but two more rushed in. One went low, aiming to tackle Tyson, while the other swung a sharpened toothbrush at his side. Tyson twisted, the makeshift weapon grazing his ribs but failing to connect. With a brutal elbow, he knocked the second man off balance, sending him crashing into the wall. The third assailant managed to grab him from behind, locking thick arms around his chest. Tyson shifted his weight, slamming the man backward into the nearest cell bars. The clang echoed through the block, drawing attention from onlookers. "Come on, soldier boy," a voice snarled. Blaze stepped into view, his smirk replaced with a cruel grin. "Let's see if all that boxing training can save you now." The gang swarmed him. Tyson's fists flew, every strike calculated, every movement designed to conserve energy. A solid punch to one attacker's jaw sent him sprawling, but another came at him with a shiv, slicing dangerously close to Tyson's arm. The blade nicked him, drawing a thin line of blood. Tyson didn't flinch. Pain was nothing new. "You think you're untouchable?" Blaze taunted, standing back while his men did the dirty work. "You're nothing in here. Just another dog waiting to be put down." Tyson ignored the words, grabbing a chair left outside one of the cells and swinging it with force, scattering the men like bowling pins. The sound of the impact reverberated, silencing the block for a moment. It seemed over. The attackers lay groaning on the floor, their bravado shattered. But Blaze stepped forward, slow and deliberate, cracking his knuckles. "You think that's it?" Blaze sneered. "This ain't over, Carter. Not by a long shot." Before Tyson could respond, the sharp whistle of a guard's baton cut through the air. "Break it up!" A guard stormed into the scene, his baton raised as he glared at the group. "You!" The guard barked at Tyson, pointing the baton at him. "Back to your cell now." Tyson wiped the blood from his arm with the back of his hand, his breathing heavy, but controlled. He didn't argue, turning his back on Blaze as he started toward his cell. But he could feel the gang leader's eyes boring into him, his smirk a promise of more to come. As Tyson stepped inside his cell, the cold steel door slammed shut behind him. His hands braced against the wall, adrenaline coursing through him. He glanced at the thin cut on his arm, then at the pale reflection of himself in the small mirror above the sink. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar. Vulnerability. This wasn't the battlefield he was trained for. Out there, he had his team, his weapons, a mission. In here, he had nothing but his instincts and the ghosts of what he used to be. Men like Blaze weren't going to stop until he was broken or dead. Tyson took a deep breath, pushing the fear aside. He couldn't afford to let it consume him. Not here, not now. In the distance, he could still hear Blaze's laughter, faint but haunting. The fight was over, but the war had just begun. Back in his cell, Tyson lay on the thin mattress, the dim glow of the corridor lights seeping through the narrow slot in the door. The cold, cracked walls loomed around him, and the voices of the Iron Fangs carried through the silence like a cruel lullaby. "Better keep one eye open, soldier boy," one sneered from down the hall, the sharpness of his tone designed to crawl under Tyson's skin. Another chimed in, dripping with malice. "Don't matter how tough you are, Carter. You bleed just like the rest of us." Their laughter echoed, bouncing off the walls in waves, relentless and suffocating. Tyson turned onto his side, staring at the wall, his muscles coiled tight. Their words weren't just noise. They were a promise. He'd seen men crumble under less. Every taunt was a reminder that he wasn't invincible. His mind drifted back to the earlier attack, replaying the speed of it, the raw violence. Blaze had hung back, letting his men take the first swing, watching like a predator toying with its prey. They hadn't been trying to kill him. Not yet. It was a test, a warning. The real storm was still coming. Tyson's breathing slowed, but his chest felt heavy. This wasn't the battlefield he knew. There were no clear objectives, no comrades to cover his six. In the ring, he'd been the Iron Man, a name whispered with respect and fear. But here, he was just another target. Another voice pierced the quiet. "How's it feel, war hero, being locked up with the scum you thought you were better than?" Tyson's jaw tightened, the words stinging more than he cared to admit. He closed his eyes, forcing his breathing to steady, but even in the silence of his mind, the voices followed. His own thoughts betrayed him, whispering fears he tried to bury. What if Jessica couldn't clear his name? What if he didn't survive long enough to get out? What if the Iron Fangs made good on their threats? No, he muttered to himself, shaking his head. He couldn't think like that. He wouldn't. Tyson sat up abruptly, the mattress creaking beneath him. His hands ran over his face, rough with stubble, before dropping to his lap. His heartbeat pounded in his chest, but his mind clung to a single thread. He had to stay strong. Getting out of this prison wasn't just about survival. It was about justice. The people who framed him thought they could bury him here, silence him forever. They didn't realize they'd put him in a place where his instincts, his training, would keep him alive. Leaning back against the wall, Tyson let his eyes roam over the small, cramped cell. He studied every detail, the scuffs on the floor, the peeling paint, the faint graffiti carved into the metal bed frame. This was his battleground now. His gaze landed on the narrow window high above the cell, its dirty glass offering only a sliver of the night sky. The faintest glimmer of stars peeked through, a cruel reminder of the world outside, a world he needed to return to. He thought of his mother's face, the way her hands trembled when she hugged him before the trial, the tears she tried to hide when the guilty verdict was read. He thought of Jessica, her sharp determination, her promise to uncover the truth. They were counting on him to survive, to hold on long enough for justice to find him. Another voice from the cells broke the stillness. "Carter, time's running out." Tyson exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the bed frame until his knuckles turned white. Fear coiled in his stomach, but he didn't let it show. He couldn't afford to. The men taunting him, the ones circling like sharks, they wanted to see him break. Not tonight. Not ever. He forced himself to lie back down, his head resting on the thin pillow. The voices continued, a relentless tide of hatred and malice, but he let them fade into the background. His focus turned inward, his thoughts sharpening like the edge of a blade. The Iron Fangs wanted him afraid. They wanted him broken before they struck again. But Mike Tyson wasn't about to give them that satisfaction. As his breathing steadied and his eyes drifted closed, he made a silent vow. He would survive this place. He would outlast the threats, the violence, the fear. And when the time came, he would expose the truth about the Iron Fangs, about the warden, about the people who thought they could destroy him. Mike Tyson wasn't a man to be underestimated. If the voices in the dark thought otherwise, they would learn soon enough.
If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe Undercover Insights channel.